What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at Area 51 Unclassified, Part 2. We're going to take a look at another document. Let's go ahead and get started. Document number or name is C00179-739. Let's go ahead and take a look. So, I'm going to read what I can. Some of this is hard to read in like a different language, and it's just abbreviations. But basically, this one, it says, warning, note graph 4 claimed that the 2 days before the disaster, the pilots clearly wrote on the flight log book that something was wrong with the plane. December 3rd, 1992. Text. He suspended his teaching job at the University of California in the United States and went to Guilin, where the disaster occurred. After returning from the scene of the crash, where a memorial ceremony had been held for his brother, he sat before the staff reporter looking heavy-hearted and depressed. He talked about the questionable points, about the lesson, and about his feelings. He is Wang Wixang, brother of Wang Wenhua, the co-pilot of the 24 November air crash. Now, this was approved for release in March of 1998. This was released 6 years after, as far as release to the appropriate body. Now, what is wrong with the plane? That's what the subhead reads. Wang quietly opened the certificate, which was awarded to his deceased brother by the Civil Aviation Authority. It reads, name, Wang Wenhua, home, Jiangsu, date of birth, September 1951, profession, first pilot, remarks, he was awarded with the second-class Safe Pilot Medal, and as of the end of 1991, he safely flew for a total of 8,019 hours. This certificate is similar to newspaper reports about Flight Captain Zhu Jinan in that they were both very experienced, possessed excellent expertise, and were in good shape. Moreover, Wang quoted the relevant personnel of the Jiangsu Aviation Authority as saying that it was impossible that the accident was caused by the pilot's actions and that it was a very special accident. Therefore, he could not help asking, what was the cause of the air disaster? One of the most disastrous ones in world aviation history. He told this reporter, without concealing his feelings, that from his inquiries at various quarters over the past few days, he has learned that on 22 and 23 November, the 2 days before the disaster, the pilots clearly wrote on the flight log book that something was wrong with the plane. Now, Wang stressed that he was not an aviation expert and said that all speculations were guesswork before an affirmative explanation of the cause of the disaster could be derived from the black box. Wang says, however, that if the black box's data prove that the fault was in the plane and if the cause tallies with the problem recorded on the flight log, he has reason to believe that the airline had neglected eliminating the faults and maintaining the plane, or that the airplane manufacturer had neglected in the process of designing the shape of the plane or in assembling it. This is a picture of his wife right here, Wang's wife. Now, it says here, another subhead, draw a lesson from it and arrange for rigorous management. Although the black box has been found, the cause of the 24 November air disaster is still puzzling. Some people say that in early November, unidentified flying objects once flew over the scene where the disaster occurred. At that time, local papers gave special coverage of the incident. Was the disaster related to the UFOs? Wang said he did not believe it. He did not read those reports, but only heard of them. He said he also heard many reports about UFOs in the United States, but they did not have sufficient scientific proof. Therefore, he said it was not realistic to connect the cause of the disaster with the UFOs. Does he doubt the advanced design of the plane? Wang admitted that the China National Aviation Corporation, or the CAAC, now purchases planes with better quality and performance than any time in the past. Since China's reform and opening up, the CAAC has been gradually developing in the direction of an international airline and has not harbored any misgivings with regard to importing new types and models of planes. However, he maintained that while importing advanced airplanes, CAAC must establish a complete management system and that equipment for plane maintenance and technical personnel must catch up. Look into the cause thoroughly to avoid recurrence. Subhead, unclassified. Like family members of most other victims, Wang, sad from the bereavement of his brother, said calmly, now that the disaster has occurred and the deceased cannot come back to life, we only hope the airline will seriously and strictly look into the root cause of the disaster and that relevant quarters, including the airline and the airplane manufacturer, will draw a lesson from the disaster in order to avoid the recurrence of this kind of vicious disaster. He also made a veiled criticism of the timeliness and transparency of the media's reports after the disaster occurred. He said that since China pursues reform and opening up in various aspects, including news reporting, it should, with an attitude of reform, report the situation truthfully and quickly. China Southern Airlines is an international airline and flies many international air routes. Moreover, it is opening up the broad international market. Therefore, as a family member of the disaster victim, he hoped relevant authorities would, proceeding from international practice and from the angle of the development prospects of the airline itself, appropriately handle the question of consoling family members of disaster victims and its relations with the mass media. Admin Indall. Now let's look at the media's take on this. So this was an article published 6 years after the plane crashed. China Southern Airlines 3943 Guilin air crash in 1992. The pilot made a mistake in handling a throttle failure and the passenger plane hit the mountain. On the morning of November 25th, the search and rescue team found the flight data recorder, or FDR, of the aircraft, but its protective shell has been damaged. The internal tape is broken, and there are burn marks on the fracture. The cockpit voice recorder was missing. The investigator found that after flight CZ3943 was changed from descent to level flight, the automatic throttle on the right side of the aircraft failed and could not follow up, and it was still at 8 degrees of descent. Slow train position. In order to obtain thrust level flight, the left auto throttle was raised to 41 degrees. This further caused an imbalance in thrust on both sides, and the aircraft began to roll to the right. However, it is very distressing that a series of explosions occurred after Flight 3943 hit the mountain. The wreckage of the plane was blown to pieces. A total of 141 passengers and crew members on the plane were not alive. Rescuers arrived at the scene quickly, within 2 hours after the plane crash. However, the remains of the victims at the plane crash site were not complete. There is no precedent in the history of plane crashes. Search and rescue personnel are also under tremendous physiological pressure and psychological pressure when searching for possible survivors. Many people even have the psychological shadow. Since then, they will feel nauseous when they see the meat for a long time. Doubtful. The main reason for the damage of the black box is that the tail wing of Flight 3943 disappeared completely. According to General Situation, the main wing part of the aircraft is mostly intact after an air crash. This is why the black box is usually placed on the shock mount of the tail wing of the aircraft. However, the relevant investigation team at the crash site of the Guilin air crash did not find the tail wing of the plane for a long time, and even the large wreckage that was blown up by the explosion could not be found. Judging from the flight conditions of the crashed plane at the time, the large wreckage of the plane should have been scattered not far from the crash site. However, after the crash of the 50-ton steel giant bird, only 2-ton pieces of debris, more than 40 were collected. Only 2-ton pieces of debris, more than 40 were collected. The ton of aircraft wreckage just disappeared. The investigators of the accident investigation team were also puzzled by the anomaly of the air crash. Analysis of the cause of accident. Experts from China and the United States joined forces at the scene of the air crash and launched an investigation. That's funny, China and the US. I wonder why. However, because the black box data recorder shell of the aircraft had been damaged, the recording era broke and the fracture was burnt, and the voice recorder simply untouched. It was discovered that after deciphering the limited information at hand, the experts obtained a useful but incomplete fact. After discussion, Chinese and American experts inferred the situation of the plane crash at the time that the cause of the crash should be caused by improper handling by the crew after the plane's mechanical failure. The crew pilot had undergone a physical examination before performing the flight mission. The result of the examination at that time was that the pilot was in good health and had not been sick within 72 hours, and had no record of taking medicine or drinking alcohol. According to an expert investigation, after the aircraft was changed from descending to flying, the automatic throttle failure occurred before, which had a certain degree of impact on the operation at that time. At the same time, the thrust of the left and right engines of the aircraft differed greatly. This is what the pilot is doing. The plane will deflect during level flight. Merely using autopilot to control the aircraft to make corrections is not enough to balance the two engines and eventually cause the aircraft to roll to the right. The crew pilot was too late to make adjustments when he found out. He hurriedly pressed the slope to the right by mistake, causing the aircraft to roll and accelerate, and finally hit Tianma Mountain and caused a series of explosions. That was document C001917939 And don't you find it interesting that if you go back to the FBI, CIA undeclassified document, there's no mention of the black box being destroyed? So, what's going on here? Don't know, but that's the facts. And I hope you enjoyed this.